Hello, everyone. So looks like Usama is late or something. I guess I'll go ahead and start with announcements. Or let me first say, so this episode and the previous one and the next couple, this whole month is dedicated to ExMuslim Awareness Month. Uh, so in all your social media, please use the hashtag pound, end apostophobia, and also pound ExMuslim Awareness Month. And it's kind of like praying to the algorithm gods because you're helping the social media algorithms give us blessings. um so today's topic is, what is the future of Islam? We're doing a continuation of last episode. We have a lot more topics in here that we didn't finish discussing. So let's see, next thing. So please like, subscribe, and share this video. Again, it's like praying to the algorithm gods. It's going to help more people see this episode, this series. Let's see. There's a few other things. There's other places you can get connected with us. Our our subreddit, where we're organizing our efforts for the nonprofit, and our Discord to provide a community for people who lost theirs. You can also go to the website, unitedcults.com. All of these links are in the description below. Let's see. Now, to get some context for this episode, it would make sense, if you're watching this later, to stop this, go watch the first episode. I guess a lot of what's going to be said here is not going to make sense unless you see the first episode. And the link to the first episode is also in the description. Let's see. I want to make a point here. Someone in the YouTube comments said to me that I should, or that the audience wants me to connect with some of the other ex-Muslim YouTubers. And yeah, I'm trying to do that. A lot of them are just ignoring me. I'm not on their radar yet. So to get on their radar, what you guys can do is go to their YouTube comments and tell them about me. Let's see. All right, so let's see. Sam is still not here. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and get started with some comments that were made on our YouTube and also in the ex-Muslim subreddit. Let's see. Here we go. So Sabrama, not sure how I pronounced that, said, "The world is worried about violence in the name of religion and hatred for people who differ in their belief systems." And I guess they brought this up because last time we were talking about what people exactly are afraid of, and part of it was the numbers, just numbers, sheer numbers of Muslims. And looks like Santa joined us. You were starting to freak me out. I was getting scared. I was going to do this by myself.
Yeah, sorry about that. Had a couple of things that I needed to finish.
Yeah, that's okay. This is good. This might happen the other direction also, by the way. Yeah. And I don't even know if we set this up yet, but I made you a manager for this channel. I don't know if you accept.
Yes, yeah. Okay. I'm hoping that this is not going to be an issue in the future, but who knows? Sometimes it does happen.
It's totally fine, totally fine. As long as I know you're going to be coming in a little bit, I don't have to freak out too much. I just started. I went through all the announcements, and I just started on a first slideshow, which probably doesn't make sense now. I'm guessing we should continue the topics we wanted to discuss and then discuss people's comments at the end.
Right. Yeah.
Or I guess we could just finish this one.
No, since you have something that started, obviously you have to continue with that.
This was on the YouTube comments, and I think they're connecting to the fear that people have. The fear that people have about this is the numbers, the sheer amount of Muslims, and I guess because I don't know, they see it as a percentage of them, probably a locked-in percentage that can't be changed, because they see Muslims as atoms. So percentage of them are going to be violent, is what they're saying here.
Okay, yeah. So I think so. Sam Harris used to make this exact same argument. He doesn't emphasize it as much now, but a while back, he had a kind of. Let me see here. So there was a graph that was circulating a few years ago about the percentages of who might actually be potentially violent within a given community if there is an ideology of that sort, and it was specifically talking about Islam.
I give that a name. I call it terrorist in principle.
That's yeah.
Another way of calling it is soon to be actual terrorists.
Well, the way that I used to think about this is again by analogy with the movie The Matrix. That you know Mr. Smith in The Matrix. He's not actually always there, but you potentially have any kind of character within the Matrix that could potentially all of a sudden change on you and turn into Mr.
You mean Sam Harris was making that argument that
no.
Muslims are like that?
No, I'm talking about two separate things.
Okay.
So for Sam Harris, he used to talk about a diagram that tells you. Let me try to remember. I think he has 3 or 4 layers in it. One layer is just the totality of Muslims. Then the next layer would be people who might be sympathizing but not actually actively interested in this. And then you have a kind of a hardcore kernel of people who might be willing to do that. And if you just say it's 1% of the entire population, that's still a huge number. And so that's why it can be scary. Now, I'm not sure if this is the right way to look at it, but at the same time, it is something to bear in mind, because when we are thinking about an ideology that has persisted for thousands of years and that has is not going to go away, say, by a certain person dying or a regime being toppled. There is a very famous quote. I think it was Abu Bakr or Omar who said it right after Muhammad's death. If you worship Muhammad is dead, but God doesn't die, or something to that effect. And so that tells you that Islam is supposed to persist regardless. And I'm not saying Islam in general is just by the very sheer fact that it's an idea is going to generate that, but it's like something that could potentially lead into this type of thing under the right circumstances, and that's the issue.
So I would like to talk about this a little bit more. And holy shit, this is maybe a topic all by itself. Another context of people talking about this kind of thing is, and this is the way Jordan Peterson says it, he tells people to worry about the idea that, or the possibility that you yourself, if you were in that situation, what would you do? Don't assume you wouldn't be the Nazi that kills a bunch of Jews. And I first of all, I want to say I think what he's saying, that we should be concerned about it, is good. I think where I'm guessing where a lot of people get confused about what he's saying, I think they would kind of just assume that he's saying, and I don't think they're right, that everyone has the potential to be one of those Nazis killing Jews in the sense that if you were in the right place at the right time, you would do it. I don't think that's what he's saying, but I do believe humans, like at birth, have that potential. And if you were going to put numbers on it, Bayesian probabilities, the probability that a baby born yesterday is going to become a terrorist versus a Jesus Christ. Let's go Hitler and Jesus Christ. Okay, those numbers change as you're growing up. So by now, if you're, let's say, 20 years old, you've been living in a nice environment, you were raised well, you had loving parents, those kind of things. Oh, you're very likely to continue that route. You're not very likely to become like a Hitler. Another example I want to give, just because it just popped in my head, the Unabomber.
Mm-hmm.
The Unabomber.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the level of Hitler, but a lot of, and it's more recent, a lot of people actually agree with his concepts. I don't. For people who don't know what the Unabomber is, university bomber, Unabomber. It was a man in the 70s. He was going on maybe 20 years killing people by mail with bombs. Yeah. And his history is very interesting. Supposedly the CIA fucked with him with psychological experiments. And what people see.
No, wait.
By the way,
wait. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the Unabomber who was under the issue of the CIA.
It was at Stanford, and it was.
Right.
I don't know which government agency.
There was something that he entered into Stanford or Harvard, one of these universities, and he was taking a psychology class.
For like 3 years, he was being experimented on.
Yeah, something.
Without his knowledge, he didn't know he's being subjected to this psychological testing or whatever. And according to the movie I watch, okay, it's a fucking movie. It's not a documentary even. I think I also saw a documentary, but in the movie version of these, they also talk about his manifesto, and that's actually why they chose him apparently for the psychology test apparently. And what I think part of what they saw in him, according to the movie again, is he has these like communist views or something like that, or Marxist views. Okay.
Well, he was a sophisticated academic. If you want to look at the way that he wrote things, the way that he started out, why is it that he's targeting universities? Is because he started there.
Yes. Well, anyway, aside from trying to figure out the morality of that man in particular, the point is a lot of people empathize with his situation, and they kind of say, well, I would have done that too. They're saying it today about the man who killed the CEO of United Healthcare recently, a week ago. Okay. Now here's the point. The point I'm trying to drive here is I don't believe that it's accurate to say that every single human being alive today has the same capacity or has the chance to become a Hitler or become a Unabomber or whatever. At birth we did, but those numbers changed as we went into the future. And so as an example for the Unabomber, what was wrong with him? According to the movie again, he didn't have any loving relationships with anybody. He tried to have a girlfriend, couldn't have a girlfriend. He tried to have a friend, couldn't have a friend.
Well,
go ahead.
First of all, about the Unabomber, probably it's a little bit too simplistic to reduce the whole thing into. He's the characteristic type who was ostracized and didn't have people, and that's why he was.
Well, definitely not. I started with the CIA thing.
Yeah, but what I really wanted to talk about here is to connect this with the Nazi example that you mentioned, and what I started with about the approach that Sam Harris was talking about, which is a purely statistical approach, saying you take a very small percentage that you would almost certainly be getting these people out of a given population. And if the population is big enough, then you're going to be getting statistically a huge number. So if you go to Germany and look at the Germany at the time of World War II, and look at the people over there, you wouldn't say that these people are criminals, that they are inherently a bad population, or that there is something wrong. We're talking about regular people, but there are circumstances under which you can actually transform these people into a Mr. Smith that
But
can act.
there's a huge but here. These people were educated. I'm gonna where is it? Educated, indoctrinated by the Prussian school system. Okay, the Prussian school system was designed by the people who made it, by psychologists. Okay, they were doing what they called, in their words, social engineering. They wanted people to be obedient to them. They wanted them to be just smart enough to work for them in companies, but not smart enough where they would, have their own mind and disagree and do something else. They wanted obedient people, and they successfully made a lot of obedient people.
Right. But at the same time, Hitler was working within an environment that was just coming out of World War One, that was fresh out of this
All of that matters, yes.
sanctions, all these.
Talking about World War II now, and by the way, now we're talking global shit. Oh, now, okay, I'm not talking about individual people. I told my daughter this recently because she asked me, and I recently learned this, I think, from Roy Casagranda. That I know his name now. I can say his name now. No, I heard this from before too. The way the winners of World War I treated the losers,
Mhm.
and then the way the winners of World War II treated the losers were different, and they resulted in totally different outcomes. In World War I, the idea was to punish, and then that resulted in World War II. I'm not the only one that says this. And by the way, every claim I make about history is like, I didn't make it up. I learned it from a historian, okay? Actually, same for all my physics comments, right? I have a few physics things that I invented. The rest I got from Einstein and people like you. What was my point? I went into physics. Do you remember?
Well, we were looking at populations versus individuals, and the kind of thing that might turn a population or a percentage of the population into potentially harmful groups.
That doesn't help me, but that's all right. So, oh yeah, the end of World War II was, we're not going to punish, we're going to help. The Marshall Plan, we sent money and companies to rebuild Germany and Japan. Not only that, we sent our best business consultants, business management consultants, like to Japan. I don't know about Germany in particular, but I know we sent them to Japan in the 50s because that led to Toyota and the amazing things that Toyota did. And then our business consultants here then gained from that Toyota guy. His name is Ono. He's the number 2 man of Toyota in the 80s. Anyway, I'm I'm getting goosebumps talking about this kind of stuff. We hugely helped the Japanese and the Germans, and then what happened afterwards was they became like the most peaceful and productive people on the planet. Which is like very different than what happened with World War I.
But that transition on its own is actually tremendously impressive when you're looking at such harmful ideologies and entities like the Nazi Empire and the Japanese Empire having transformed after a defeat into basically the complete opposite. And you might say, well, maybe something of that sort could happen to people who might be holding an ideology like the toxic Islamism that might be harmful. Is that something that's even possible? I'm not sure. Is there an entity that can be defeated in that same way and then reinvented or put in a different form that might be more conducive of peaceful coexistence. I'm not sure. There seems to be something persistent there that has lasted 1400 years, that keeps on repeating, taking on more reincarnations that more or less have similar characteristics that keep on appearing over and over. So I'm not sure about that.
By the way, so somebody is asking for something. Ryan Wilson says, "Hello, Sam. It's Osama, by the way. I'm a Muslim who wants to leave Islam because I find it immoral. However, I would like to be sure that it's false before leaving because I don't want to go to hell forever." So I don't think this makes sense for us to talk about it in this episode. I do want to talk about stuff like that in other episodes. Like, do you agree with that, Osama? Like, this episode doesn't work?
I do agree, but I think if there is a comment that appeared right now, and if the person is present right now, it might be at least worth addressing this a little bit.
Okay, well, he gave two more comments, and he gave specific things he would like you to address. So I guess let's do that then. So here's the next comment. Can you debunk the Quranic challenge where Quran asked to bring a surah like it? So let me say first about this. I did a podcast with a man that goes by the name Zorro. He's a friend of mine for like 5 years. He's Osama and them have known each other for like 15 years, right?
We've known each other for more, yeah.
For more. And so if you really want to get a long answer to this, I recommend you watch that podcast I did with Zorro. If you just go to my YouTube channel and search Zorro, you should be able to find it. There's 2 only. But go ahead if you want to say something about this, Osama.
Well, the way that this is phrased, quite honestly, is more or less the stereotypical way that a Muslim might come object to an ex-Muslim. You've left Islam. Well, answer a challenge of this sort. I think that if you're addressing the challenge on its own, it's basically a non-challenge, because if you bring a surah that looks like it, you would say, well, that looks like you're imitating the Islam. If you bring something that's very different from it, then, well, this is very different from Islam. So I don't think, from the Quran, I don't think this is something that's going to bring something into Islam or have them leave Islam.
So let me summarize what Osama said, Ryan. Just so what he said in layman's terms is it's a term we use, a concept we use called falsifiability. A theory or an idea or anything, any conception we have, it needs to be falsifiable, which means that we can find out it's wrong. There's a way to find out it's wrong. So we do that. The way we do that with physics, every time we come up with a physics theory, built into the theory is this is how we find out it's wrong. There's an experiment designed inside the theory. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we make theories without knowing an experiment that could be there?
The thing about the theory is that we don't even build this into it on purpose. This is something that, because of the fact that we're actually investigating nature directly, the whole thing comes out spontaneously. It's not something that gets built in. But with something like this Quranic challenge, if you go to the actual places in the Quran where this is mentioned, it's so ambiguous that it doesn't have any criteria. It doesn't tell you anything that qualifies as a surah like it or not like it, and it's just thrown out, which means that the criteria are going to be getting modified every time that someone brings up an example or a counterexample of this. And so it's really a non-challenge.
So Ryan, if you would like to know more about that, we could talk about it another day. He brings up one more issue. What do you have to say about Muslims who say that Muhammad never told a lie and was known to be trustworthy even by his enemies? Is this
true? I would say the following. I would say that this is a claim that's made in the Sirah, but if you go to the Quran itself, you would see that there have been so many accusations lodged against Muhammad for being a magician, a liar, a crazy person, all sorts of things. These things were reinvented after the death of Muhammad. This is something in the Sirah, and it's probably something that had to do with the people that came after him, the dynasties that wanted to get legitimacy by saying that we belong to Muhammad and to his ideology, namely the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and all these people who wanted to get legitimacy from Muhammad. Again, a non-issue again.
Okay. And we're happy to talk about this more, Ryan. On another day, we would try to find something that maybe a day special for Muslims to come, because I really wasn't expecting a Muslim to come talk to us, not in the first couple episodes.
Probably you should, because a grand title like Deconstructing Islam is probably going to be attractive.
I really wasn't expecting it. I guess maybe I should. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me put this back on the screen now. I wonder even how to do that. How do I do that without? There it is. So here's the next slide here. Somebody asked, this is still the YouTube. Is Islam a death cult? Should the Western world allow them within our borders? And I thought to answer right away. It was kind of easy to answer, I thought. A nation should only allow in people that have compatible values. So for the Western nations, that means people who value freedom and reason. Some Muslims do value freedom and reason, so they're welcome. Also, some people who present as Muslims are actually closet ex-Muslims who fear the death penalty and social punishment. So if you were going to have on your immigration forms, about why you want to come to this country, or anything, like if you say you're a Muslim, it doesn't mean you're a Muslim, because you're afraid of getting your head chopped off or any of the other social punishment you get. So anyway,
I first of all, the characterization of Islam as a death cult, probably this is focusing on a very specific, I wouldn't say brand of Islam, but it's talking about a specific aspect of Islam that it is not automatically going to be expected from every type of Muslim. We're talking about 1.6, 1.7 billion people.
Let's talk about how we were, me and you, okay? I don't know how you were. I don't know how close you were to being a terrorist, but I wasn't very close. Like, I lived in America. You were born and raised somewhere else, though. So, yes. So maybe me and you is different. Like, but living in America, I never saw anything Islamic. I never heard, like, my parents were not very Islamic already. They don't pray and stuff like that. And then also they didn't have a bunch of friends who were Muslims or Arabs even. And we lived in Los Angeles. So I don't even know how that's possible. It's a huge city. I don't know how we didn't have a lot of connection with people. And then I remember 10 years old, actually, okay, 10 years old, me and my family went to Syria. We were there for a year, okay? And much later, my aunt retold a story that happened. Me and my brother, it was a scenario where a lot of the extended family came to the same house to like hang out and sleep there. So all the kids were on the floor, laid out on whatever they put on the floor, rugs or something. And me and my brother were laying next to each other. Again, 10 years old, he's 9. And the adhan comes up. And again, that's, weird for us because we're from America. So adhan, and that's 5 times a day, right? Can you want to do it real quick so people know what we're talking about?
No, thank you. I'm not
no? No? Okay. And so I heard that, and my aunt overheard a conversation between me and my brother where we said, hey, so like, is that the same God as the one in America? I think it was my brother who asked the question, and I answered, no, I think they're different gods, and I don't remember my reasoning. Again, I don't remember this. It's my aunt who's remembering this. So, like, how is that kind of kid, or part of a death cult?
Yeah, let me tell you about a little bit about myself in that respect. So, I am the son of an Azharite. Do you know what that is?
What's an Azharite?
So my father has his degree from the Egyptian Azhar University, which is it's the religious center of a lot of things.
You mean it's a religious sect that has a name of a university by the same name?
No. Al-Azhar is one of the biggest centers of Islamic education in the Islamic world.
Okay.
It is the name of an ancient mosque, but it's also the name of one of the first modern Islamic
That's like calling
universities.
someone a Harvardian.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yet, I would not consider myself to have grown up a religious person. I did pray, not because I loved praying. I was told to pray. The ideas of jihad, the ideas of fighting the infidels, these were things that we were taught, but it wasn't something that got to me to the point, oh, I have to go and find myself someone who's an infidel and martyr myself or whatever. That wasn't something that crossed my mind, even though we were inundated with speech, with ideas that have to do with that, both in school. In school, to some extent, it was a little bit more restrained. But if you go to the Friday sermon, things can get a little bit wild sometimes, depending on who's doing the sermon. These sermons are very often regulated by the state, and so the state also wants, for the most part, Arab states want to make sure that things are under control, and so there is some supervision, but sometimes it does get out of hand,
So
depending on, for example, events, or if there is something specific that this preacher wants to say. So you do get exposed to that. I personally, and most of the people that I know around me, were never actually moved by that into any form of action or even into any form of speech. So saying
I
it's
want
a
to give people more context in another way. On 9/11, 2001. By the way, I remember where I was. I'm guessing you remember.
Yeah.
I was in a store. I was working, cell phone store, and the TV was on, or maybe we had to turn it on. I don't remember. And you see the first plane, and then the second plane, and this was still a good decade before I became an ex-Muslim. And I remember conversations with my Muslim friends, and I remember us talking to each other like, those people are crazy.
Mhm.
Like, we didn't think of it like they were Muslims who were following Islam. We thought of it like they're crazy people, and they happen to be Muslims.
Well,
I'm not saying we were right. I'm just saying that's the conception we had. And maybe you could say the reason we were doing that is that was like that was the only theory that made sense to us. Because Islam being evil didn't make sense to us at all.
yeah. Well,
And we recognize that thing as evil. You know?
the perspective that you get from people on the other side, from a Muslim country. So at the time, I was an ex-Muslim already. I had left Islam by that time, maybe 5 or 6 years, and uh, I was viewing it not when it was actually happening. I wasn't viewing it from the perspective of a Muslim or non-Muslim. I was looking at a really bad thing that was happening. So it's not something that had a religious component to it, because the perpetrators were not known at at the time, and I wasn't really following events to know that this has had a prequel in 1993 where a failed attempt actually tried to do something similar. But then you start looking at the repercussions of this and how people start looking at it. And I could unfortunately say that I have never encountered a Muslim that would say that this is against Islam, or that this. I'm not talking about public people. I'm talking about people that you might meet in the street, people you might talk to each other directly. I have not really met someone who would give a full-fledged condemnation of what happened.
Well, I probably would have been one that did condemn, and I would have said, yeah, that's not Islam, but I wouldn't have had any real arguments because I had never read the Quran, and mine was just assumptions. Because the concept was, what I was told was, you know, religions for morality. So obviously, you have it's a bunch of my own assumptions that I developed on my own and got from all sorts of sources that I thought was all Islamic.
Well, what you just mentioned is a kind of a mixture of Christianity and Islam rather than full Islam.
Actually, it's more than that. Come on, when the Arabians of the peninsula came north, where my ancestors are from. I guess my ancestors are everywhere. When the Arabs went to Syria and took it over, okay, and made it Islamic, what it actually did is merge with the existing culture. You can't erase all of it. They erased some of it, okay? Like the language of my ancestors is erased. It doesn't exist. A lot of the culture, the traditions, I'm sure, is erased, but a lot of it stayed. Okay, so Syria is an amalgamation of Islam and the Arab culture plus what was already there, and what was already there was already a mix of 1,000 things.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then when you say what did Islam do in Egypt, that was another mix, and that's how you get why you have differences between Syrians and Egyptians, obviously. Yeah. Right? It's different mixes of what was there before and Islam. I forgot my point, though. What was the point? It was I don't know if that was all of it. Can we move on? Or let's finish this point. Even if we suppose that the original Islam was a death cult, it doesn't mean that any of the existing Islams is.
We have to remember that Islam is not purely a religion. It's both a religion and a political / military doctrine.
Yes, that makes it pretty different than a lot of other things. Yes,
and that's why there are certain parts that are going to be activated under specific concrete circumstances. So when you were looking at the time of those early conquests and expansions and all the blood that flowed, especially if you look at a place like India, it's scary to even contemplate what actually happened there.
Over the course of hundreds of years, is probably 100 million people killed.
It's not that. Let me actually explain a little bit why India in particular. The Muslim had been going back and forth to India for basically doing campaigns of raiding and getting booty, some slaves and so on from India every once in a while, and then they decided to come in and settle down after a while because it was so lucrative. But the problem with India is that unlike the other regions where you had Christians and Jews, and also to some extent the Zoroastrians, which were considered more or less or folded in within the people of the book, as the Muslims call them. When they go to India, there is no such thing. And so this means that there is no alternative. Either you become a Muslim or you die. There is no becoming keeping your religion and then paying jizya, for example, to the Muslim conquerors. And so they started killing people because of the fact that they were not of the same type of category of people who would pay the jizya. And they only stopped because it wasn't feasible to kill everybody, and because they needed someone to manage the land and to do this management of the resources. So
depending on how you define a death cult, if you say a death cult is any group that will kill you for leaving, okay, well then it is, because it's got the death penalty for leaving.
Yeah.
And it's not just that law was executed 1400 years ago, it's being executed today still by individual people, not just states, but sometimes people are doing it on behalf of the state, independent of the state.
Yeah.
But we're backing, obviously.
That connects to the initial point I was making here about Islam being both a religion and a political slash military ideology. Because if you treat it that way, and then you go back, and I think we discussed that before, to the moment right after Muhammad died, and people started reverting to their former religions, former allegiances, and so on. And those were called the apostasy wars. That's how we ended up with more or less the type of doctrine that we have right now for apostasy in Islam. Because what actually happens is that an apostate is considered to be a traitor, someone who has committed high treason against the state. And staying there and operating as such, you're not only a traitor, but you're also potentially someone who could be causing other people to follow suit. And that's why they treat this whole thing as something that needs to be dealt with through death, because it's considered to be high treason.
Another part of it, and I don't know why I didn't think of this from the beginning, what I think people mean by death cult is all the instances where there was a cult that ended with the leader poisoning the whole group and they all died together.
Yeah.
That's what you usually hear from a death cult. And here's the thing. Ayan Hirsi Ali used this phrase too. And I agree with the concept, because what she was different, and this is when she was an atheist, but it makes sense. It leads to how she is today, she said how, in Christianity, and at least this is one version of it, one version of Christians. If I was to give it a name, I would say the Protestants, Baptists, whatever, I don't know, not the Catholic version, where they celebrate life. And in Islam, at least one version of it, they celebrate death. They actually sacrifice this is the logic, the philosophy. Sacrifice everything here so that you get rewards in heaven.
Yeah, that's
so fuck this life. Let's go do death instead.
Yeah, and that's I don't think this is a special type of Islam. This is actually a central theme in the Quran as a whole. It's something that every Muslim is supposed to know. But in terms of the action that follows from that, that's the issue where there's going to be a difference between these two different groups.
But again, let's help people connect everything we've been saying. Okay, so when Islam, the supposed death cult, the culture mixed with, let's say, Syria or Egypt or any other place, the values mixed too. So the place where my parents are from, they value life. Okay, it's normal to value life, by the way. A lot of cultures had it. It wasn't something very special. Like it's kind of easy, loving your kids and shit like that. That's fucking easy to get. And so Muslims growing up in this area, who in this culture that valued life, and then Islam merged with it, it probably still valued life. So and then any individual person growing up in this new culture, this merged Islam and already their culture, also generally is producing kids that have the same values of that culture it came out of. So like me and you, yes, we're Muslims, and yes, our ancestors got invaded by Muslims and we became Muslims. That's all true, but also we still have our amazing fucking values that our pre-ancestors had before Islam merged with it. Like, we like life, we like food, we like cooking. There's a lot of things we like, and it's not death, and it's completely incompatible with death.
Right, and the part that has to do with taking someone out of their environment and then subjecting them to a situation where they might have to actually put their life on the line for the expansion, like what was happening at the beginning of Islam. That's something that doesn't happen very often because of any kind of ideology. It especially at the beginning, for the most part, it happened because of financial gain, because of people just being part of a tribe that all of a sudden became under the leadership of Muslims, and so they end up with them going to the battle for again political and economic gain. But this is not necessarily something that's specific to Islam. So I remember, and this is a little bit weird because we're going back to World War I. My grandfather was actually faked his age when the
Oh, you
Ottomans,
didn't go to war?
in order not to go to war,
Oh, the opposite.
for the Ottomans.
Okay, okay.
So at that time,
That's why the Ottomans lost then.
yeah, so they would take literally young men and then throw them in war because they didn't have any people. And this actually also to some extent, but not to that same horrible degree, happened also in Nazi Germany in World War II, where they ran out of actual soldiers and then started looking for.
Well, you made a point though. Your grandfather valued life. He didn't want to go to war. He didn't want to die in war.
Right.
Where a lot of Muslims in the past, and probably some today, and again, this is not specific to Islam even. You see this in movies with like a war culture. Actually, with samurais, for example, there's honor in dying in battle. So in Islam, there's honor in dying as a martyr. There shouldn't be honor in dying as a martyr. That shouldn't exist. That's the association with death cult.
I wouldn't even call it honor in the case of Islam. You're actually trying to get the highest or the best kind of accommodations in the afterlife, and that's how you end up seeking death in battle for the sake of Islam.
I think what you're saying is their honor system is horrible. What they consider honorable.
Yeah, it's honor is part of this, but it's not the main motivation for them. They think, like you said at the beginning, that this life is worthless and it's only the afterlife that matters. In fact, there are so many places in the Quran that talk about how this life is actually a worthless play and has no value at all. And yet, at the same time, you can see that when the conquests were taking place, there are places where people are being tempted or being incentivized with the war booty and things of that sort. There is a very famous hadith about Muhammad. I don't know how realistic this is or how truthful it is, but enticing his followers to go to Tabuk, which is right now in North Saudi Arabia, where a Roman garrison was, and he would, the hadith goes, go and raid Tabuk to get the yellow, the daughters of yellow, that is to say, blonde girls.
Okay, we only have 10 minutes left, and we only did 2 slides. Well, this is very different. Okay, so Avoriez in summer. This is from the ExMuslim subreddit. This person talks often on my stuff. The question was, he was trying to answer, how do we make this world into what we want it to be? And he, what we mean is with respect to Islam, or how do we prevent Islam ruling the world? And he went to talk about education. And I wonder if, then he is also talking about immigration. And then talking a lot about Islam, which is like education. But I think when he said education, I think he means more like K-12, forced education, education camp type education. And then he gave an example, or by the way, I don't know if it's a he or not. They gave an example of what an individual could do. I want to talk about all these kind of things later. The education one is going to be huge, probably deserves its own series even, but at least its own episode. Immigration also, we talked a little bit about that before, and here now. I don't think you're against immigration, right? We're for immigration.
Yeah, it's just it has to be definitely regulated. But I think in the US and Canada, it's already more or less regulated to a degree, far more effective than it is in Europe. Europe is it's unfortunate what's actually happening in Europe, and it's unfortunate for two different reasons. It's unfortunate because it has to um, uh, take the toll of humanitarian crises that are taking place at their doorstep, but at the same time, it's a bad thing because it's really totally unregulated, and it seems to be happening solely for humanitarian reasons without really taking into account the effects of this. I definitely think that Europe is far more in need of this right now.
Yeah, Europe needs to act more like the US. Yes, yes, yes. But that's a basic thing. Like whatever country you're in, if you see another country have less problems than you do in a certain respect, you should try to go learn what they're doing different than you and try to improve. It's no different than what people should do in anything. Like, let's say you're competing in boxing or football. Okay, what do they do in football? The coach watches so many hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of the other team that they're playing. Even some of the players do that. Learn from the other guys. Yeah, so that's it. UK, or not just UK, Europe, you got to learn from us. And I'm not saying US has nothing to learn from other countries, but with respect to immigration, it seems like the US is doing better than the rest of the Europe.
Which, but at the same time, it's not only an issue of learning. I mentioned this before. The U.S. has the benefit of having two oceans on either side, so it's a kind of a filter that prevents people who might be just willing to take a boat and cross a relatively short distance by boat, or to go across the border.
You got to do something that addresses the issue that Ian Hersey explained to us over a decade ago about a big difference between the UK and the US. And this basic thing she explained was, in the UK, you can, as an immigrant, you can end up in a place where there's only immigrants of that same kind in your little, they call that a ghetto, right? You're in this little place where only your kind of people are there, your tribe, your whatever. Let's say you're Somalians, a group of Somali neighborhood. And the way she described it was, you could live your whole life there and never speak to somebody from another, which means you never even have to speak English or whatever language of your home country, of that country. And she said that, and part of it was about work. She mentioned that you don't have to work. In America, you can't even end up in a ghetto like that. They don't exist. There's no ghettos like that here. Like, they never formed. Or if there are, they're not many. Like, part of Dearborn, Michigan is like
that. I was going to say Dearborn.
But even Dearborn, Michigan is still not like.
Yeah, no, it's not to the same extent. But let
me finish my point, though. So the point was, she said, in America, when you get over here, you actually are pressured right away to get a job. And then in that job is where you're learning the culture, integrating.
I think it's deeper than that.
Sure, go ahead, explain, please.
I think it's mainly an issue of assimilation. So it is possible. So take various waves of immigration to all sorts of places. You will see that for the most part, people get into like what is known for the US as the Great American Melting Pot, that you actually end up with something that has its own character. People get assimilated in it, and you might keep your culture that you brought with you in one sense or another, but you're actually part of this new place. The problem with a true Muslim is that um, since their allegiance is not to a specific country, but to the Ummah, the nation, the Islamic nation, this means that um, uh, uh, doing something like a pledge of allegiance to a different country is something that they would not do wholeheartedly.
I think what you're saying that in general, if we were to think of this statistically, if you took all the potential Muslim immigrants versus all the potential non-Muslim immigrants, the Muslim immigrants are more likely to not assimilate because of this thing you're describing.
Yeah. So they might um, swear during, for example, a citizenship process, that they're going to have allegiance to this particular country, and so there are certain things that they would say, but they would never actually truly give it precedence over other things that they feel is more fundamental, that addresses their connection to the wider Islamic nation. And that's I think that's part of the reason why you might end up having people that might appear normal, and then all of a sudden they're living as good citizens. They are doctors. They are well educated, and then all of a sudden they fly a plane into a building.
Who is it? South Park did an episode making fun of that concept, but he did it with Canadians. And it was something like it happened from a song programmed all Canadians to whenever the trigger happens to want to go kill, I don't even remember who, some famous person. And then this character was a little kid, in South Park, got this program, it got the programming got activated, and he going to try to kill this man, and then he finds out the man's already dead, and he goes, "Oh." That's hilarious. Okay, next thing here. Let's see. So, did it work? It did. Another one from Reddit. I believe in freedom of religion, but this specific religion should be outlawed and shamed and discouraged. It's not a normal religion. I think we get the point here. So what do you think of the idea of banning a religion, outlawing a religion?
I think banning anything is problematic. So I tend to be.
We do ban a lot of things, though. We ban murder.
Murder is not a religion. I mean, murder, you're crossing a line by terminating the life of another person. You might terminate the life of another person because you have some property conflict with him. You might have some love issue with it. So it's something that has a kind of a universal thing that has nothing to do with a specific ideology. What I wanted to say, though, is that banning something is actually not a good way to combat it. Bringing everything to the open, making sure that if you're under a situation where there is something like a Nazi ideology, I would like to actually hear these people speak rather than have them go underground and start doing something behind the scenes that might eventually actually lead to something that would end up surprising people with a horrible massacre, for example.
Trig the Boss says, this is Islamophobic. All religion is a tool that has the propensity to be wielded abusively in extreme cases. I don't know. I think there's probably some religions, especially if you invent one now, I could invent a religion that says don't do that in particular. Like, and that's the whole concept of the religion. Don't do that.
I think so. Today, Islam is the problematic religion, but if you go to medieval Europe, you can see that the Inquisition then was a problem. Is it something that comes out from Christianity directly? That's questionable. That might be debatable, but it is something that had a manifestation of Christianity at one
Well,
point.
I'll say a religion that has a concept of God, and I mean the kind of God that is perfect, can't make mistakes, omniscient, all that. I think that has a potential to screw with the person. You know, I already have the truth, therefore,
yeah,
anything goes.
It's actually I would probably strip it down to something that has to do with monotheism, because when you're talking about monotheism and you go back to its origins, it's basically cheering for one specific god to the detriment of all others, and God doesn't actually exist with you in your real life. Other people who believe in their other god live with you, and so
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this then. Is Hinduism, let me say it this way, is a test of your theory what Hindus do? Like, if Hindus are violent, then your theory is wrong, right?
Well, that's not necessarily the case. I'm saying that if you have monotheism, then you have a likelihood of ending up with that. If you don't have monotheism, that does not necessarily, it does not.
It's just less. Okay. There's many reasons you could be violent. Yeah, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. I think making Saudi Arabia the country that Islam started at, leave it, would be the best thing to do. This was answering the question, you know, how do we unshackle ourselves from Islam? And I don't think they're thinking by force. I don't really know, but I mean, a little bit of this is happening now. Like, Saudi Arabia is opening up, at least visually. Visually at least.
Yeah.
They're doing these events, public events, where there's, you know, very good looking women, looking, you know, doing like beauty pageants. I don't even know what they're doing, but, like, you know, I don't watch beauty pageants, so I don't really know. But, you know, it's not the kind of thing that was happening in Saudi Arabia 10 years ago even. So they're openly embracing some Western values, some I don't even know if it's accurate to call them Western values. We should maybe say they're human values, because it's, you know, we're talking freedom. Let women do what they want.
I think it's a lot of it is just shifting the type of control. We might have discussed this briefly at one point in the past. Shifting the type of control that was done over the society from being just focused on religion to talking about not doing any kind of infraction that would hurt the royal family. But at the same time, the current ruling family, the current branch of the ruling family, is not necessarily showing you that this is a change that is going to uproot everything that has been there for thousands of years, and now everything now is great. It's like that illusion that Bush tried to bring democracy to Iraq, tried that, and all of a sudden it's
well, the kind of thing I was thinking about is like more long term, like somebody today who's, let's say, 8 years old, seeing what's happening in Saudi Arabia now, the better things, okay? And then that person 20 years later, 28 years old now, has that little seed in their head about what Saudi Arabia was like when they were little. That's different than 30-year-olds today.
Yeah, that's a valid way of thinking about it. And there is something that can be said about an enlightened despot in the sense of the Enlightenment. And this is something that we have seen in Tunisia and in Turkey to some extent.
I think the point being made here, though, is if the whole Muslim world is seeing it happen in the center of where it started, that has more impact than if it was just happening in Syria or something.
No, I disagree.
Huh.
I disagree. People view Saudi Arabia indeed as a kind of a religious leader, but that leadership itself does not reflect on the religion. So people are not religious because Saudi Arabia is religious. Uh,
Yeah,
the,
because one way they could do it is, and I already had this in my head, but I wanted to see what you thought first. One way somebody could think of it is, oh my God, look, the Muslims in the original place got bad. We need to fix Islam. We need to become more Islamic, you know. And because part of the story, within the theology, within the theory of Islam is, hey, we've been getting away from Islam and we need to get back to it.
Oh yeah. And one thing here is, unlike Catholicism, where you have a centralized religious authority in the person of the Pope and his institution, you don't have that in Islam. You have Saudi Arabia might be a religious center, but it's not the only center. And in different localities, you have people that have different allegiances and different religious schools and so on. So it's not the same thing.
I don't know if this is relevant or if it matters. I want to have you analyze this real quick. So one big difference between Catholicism and Protestantism, the way the Catholic Church worked was they tried to make everything where all humans had to talk to one dude and talk to God through the one man, Pope. Protestantism said something else, and I say this is a move towards something better, intellectual, which is no middleman. Each of us has to speak to God. Meaning there's a distributed decision making. Okay, there's not even a leader. Like where in Islam there isn't a pope, but there also isn't Protestantism.
Yes,
where everyone has to decide for it's more like a bunch of little mini popes.
exactly. It's not actually mini popes. It's people who are fighting for the position of the Pope.
But I'm not sure that's accurate, and I'm not sure what you mean. I guess in the Pope version, it was Pope saying, "I'm the king of Catholicism." In the Islam version, these people that are their own mini Pope, they're not most of them. They're not saying, "I have my own version of Islam." They're saying, "This is the Islam. I'm just one of the people speaking about it."
Yeah. This actually, I mean, most of the infighting that happened within the Muslim community right from the time when Muhammad died can be traced exactly to this issue. People fighting over the legitimacy. And if we're talking about this extreme form of monotheism, you're not only against people of different religions, you're also against people who are of different sects. And so people are actually fighting for that legitimacy, and they would say, they're not saying I'm the Pope, they're saying I'm the Caliph. And so it's the Caliphate's concept, which has lasted for 1400 years. Only in 1920s, after the Ottoman Empire collapsed, that you could say this has gone forever. Revived briefly with ISIS, but then thankfully it got squashed again.
So I think what the Muslim world needs is a little bit of what the Christian world did, is to say, get rid of the middleman, speak to God directly.
Well, here's the problem with that. The Pope, or Christianity in general, even though it took the Hebrew Bible and put it as the very first part of their Bible, in Islam this is different. In Islam, you have a version that is so similar to Judaism in so many different ways that the authority of the caliph, the authority of what is equivalent to the Pope, is not a worldly authority that has a kind of a religious aspect to it. It's actually implementing something that is pretty much the heart of the religion. And so trying to create this kind of democratization of the religion is so very different in Islam. It's not even, I cannot imagine that it's possible. There are attempts like the people who chuck away the Sunnah and say we're going to only follow the Quran, and then start coming up with all sorts of modernist interpretations that do away with a lot of the things that have to do with specific sayings of Muhammad, that have to do with specific going ons of the history of Muslims, but to actually consider something like um, what happened to Christianity, I think it's very hard.
It's gonna be harder, but I think it's gonna happen. We had what was his name? Abu Sina?
Ibn
Ibn Sina.
Yeah.
Abu Sina. It almost sounds the same. Ibn Abu, father or son of. It's either father of a dude or son of a dude. The people who don't know Arabic. This guy was what, 900 years ago? What I learned about him, this is amazing. He interpreted Islam to mean this. Look, Allah made all the religions. So all the religions are true. And of course, they conflict. So you have to figure out what's good and what's bad. But that's all under Islam. That's amazing, dude. The guy came up with that thing 900 years ago. So he doesn't get his head chopped off. That's my
most of those thinkers at the time were considered heretics or even atheists of some sort. So even though it was very
close enough where a lot of people bought it.
Yeah.
That's good. I think that's amazing to be able to reform it that way. I don't even see another way, by the way. It has to be stuff like that. You have to be, by the way, all the people that figure stuff out like us and then exit, it's very difficult for us to try to improve anything. For the people staying inside, they can have an effect.
Yeah.
Trying to change it from the inside.
But at the same time, I think people on the outside, especially people who are able to speak openly, they have an empowering effect that is very different from what some of the people on the inside do and cannot possibly say because of where they are.
Yes. Anyway, it needs both. One more slide here. Have extra steps to grant immigrants citizenship to the country they choose to by making it mandatory to learn history, learn the language. I mean, you'd have to be testing these things, not just saying you have to do them. I like some tests like that, like an interview. They do interviews now, somebody asks you questions, you got to answer pretty good. Yeah. And I think that, expand the shit out of that. Yes.
Yeah,
I know what their values are.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable, especially so if you have a large population, if you decide to let in a large population, something of that sort has to be instituted in order to just do a simple filter. I mean, yeah, I'm totally with that.
Trick the Boss says, I'm cool with better education everywhere, but the USA shouldn't turn away refugees from crises they've created and exacerbated. I agree with this in the sense that if a country goes and fucks shit up in another country, yeah, they should help unfuck them. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, of course, you still have to have the basic concept of you can't let in anyone. But go the extra mile to try to get the ones that would work.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that you go to a country and then grab a random group of people, a large group of people. Statistically speaking, forget about ideology. You're probably going to be getting some criminals along the way. If you're not going to be checking the history of these people and saying, well, this is a criminal, do I really want to add more criminals to my society? Probably you're not going to be letting them in anyway. So that's not different from this.
So, by the way, we're 15 minutes over. We finished all the slides. We remember we had a list of topics we didn't finish from before, but apparently we got through some of them through these comments, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I recommend we stop now. We revisit what topics are left, and there's going to be a third one still, you know, to finish up these topics. And there'll probably be more comments on YouTube and on Reddit. I will gather them. We'll keep discussing. Oh, here we go. This is a new person. X1. The truth will calm them down. It's probably watching from something earlier. I don't know what. Trig the Boss says, looking forward to the future episodes, I guess. He said something else too. I'm not sure what he was saying was lasting, and I think I know who he means by the orange man. Do you have anything left to say, Osama?
I mean, there are certain things that we wanted to discuss since last time, but I think that can wait for next time. Talking a little bit more about numbers, about statistics. That's
you were gonna get some stats. Did you get them?
Yeah. That's going to wait until next time, though.
But you have like a visual ready. We were gonna talk about the two types of jihad.
Yes.
Yeah. We were gonna talk about Islam encroaching in Western places, the class of civilizations, and you mentioned Huntington.
Yeah. So I think these are still very important topics that need to be touched on.
And then regarding US-UK integration, you had mentioned that you think the UK doesn't have much in the way of regulations for vetting.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about this. I cannot claim to be an expert, so I'm just looking at this like any other person looking at this from the outside, seeing how things are very different. Maybe it's not necessarily the UK only. You also have places like France in particular, where you have. I mean, if you look at France, Islam is the second religion in the country, so that's something significant.
By the way, I keep saying UK. I mix up UK and Europe. I'm kind of dumb like that. That's how Americans are a little bit. When I said US and UK, I should have said US and Europe. When Ayan Hirsi Ali was talking about these things, she wasn't even in the UK. She was in the country called Dutch.
Yeah, she was a parliament member in the Netherlands. So she
Netherlands. Isn't it also called Deutschland or something? Deutschland?
No, Deutschland is Germany, but the Dutch is the language that the Netherlands speaks.
I mix all that up. Being an American, I guess. Maybe that's normal for being far away from Europe, you know.
Oh well, like, yeah, but still, it's there is a historical reason for why it's called Dutch and why the Germans are called Deutschland, because this was actually just considered one thing at one point.
I don't have a religion. I'm atheist. Fred Dino says, and then says typical American. I know it's typical, but you know, I'm gonna take a guess. A lot of places, you know, have you don't know a lot about every place, obviously, right?
Yeah.
It's not much different than this. I saw a study done where about can you differentiate differences of the faces of a race? And what they found was you do very well differentiating faces within your own race, and you do poorly with other races. But that makes sense just from, you know, you have a lot of practice in it. Yeah. So I have a lot of practice differentiating faces of people in America. I mean, I guess that actually probably makes it harder for me because I don't have a lot of the same faces, you know. Where if you were living in, let's say, China, you probably do very well differentiating Chinese faces and maybe not so well European faces.
Oh yeah. Living, for example, in an Arab country, you're able to tell this person comes from this region, this person comes from this region, this person comes from this. I mean the facial features without them even speaking a word. Of course, if they start speaking, you can pick up on the dialect, but that's different.
Yeah. By the way, about the dialect thing. So I spent time in Syria, you know, and I was like, last time I was there, I was 26 years old. And you probably don't know, but my pronunciation in Arabic is pretty damn good. I found out. Like, in 5th grade, I was in an Islamic school. I was 4th grade in an Islamic school in Los Angeles. And one day they told me, hey, can you come over here to the 5th grade class? I was like, why? They put me over there and they said, okay, read the Quran with tajweed. And I was very good at that, apparently. And so people who don't know what that means, you know how when the people recite the Quran, they do it like it sounds like music? That's what I was able to do. Probably still am. And so I'm 26 years old. I'm in Syria, and I'm like, and by the way, I have a very big incentive to not let anyone know I'm a foreigner, because they do things like cheat you with a taxi. You know, they'll take a longer route and charge you more. Yeah. So I didn't want anyone to know that I'm a foreigner. And I was only able to do that if I say one sentence. If I say more than one sentence, they could tell. But it was worse than that. Even the one sentence is not enough. I got in a taxi once. I said like one word. And then he goes, so where are you from? I'm like, how the fuck could you tell? He goes, when you got in the car, it was raining outside. And in Syria, it's, I don't know why, but it gets muddy. I guess there's sand in the air or something. I don't know. It gets muddy when it rains. And he goes, you got in the car and you put your feet on the mat. And I, like trying to keep the mud on the mat. He goes, everybody else just throws their legs out and mud goes everywhere. What he was telling me was I was respecting his car and other people there don't respect his car. Anyway, that was a long-winded story for no reason. So I guess that's it. Have anything else, Osama?
That's it for this time then.
All right. Stay on for a couple minutes, okay?
Sure.
And goodbye, everyone.
Okay, goodbye.
Is it ending yet?